Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and I am joined by two of our touring docents, Kay Dunn and Ruth Shedwick-Bryant, who will be leading today's Slow Art conversation. Every Friday at 12 p.m., docents lead virtual interactive conversations about a few works in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Kay and Ruth will lead us in an interactive conversation about three artworks in the museum's collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each one. Kay and Ruth will allow us time to look at each work on our own slowly before leading a conversation with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Ruth, Kay, myself, and each other throughout the program. A few notes before we get started. You probably noticed that your microphone and video were muted by default. In just a moment, I will make it so that you can turn on your microphone. We do ask that you leave your microphone off unless you're actively asking a comment or asking a question or making a comment. It's been a while since I did this. Choose a quiet room and close the door. Please silence any alerts from nearby devices, as they can be distracting during the program. If you do turn on your video, try not to sit in front of a window, lamp, or other strong source of light or movement, as it can make it difficult for us to see you. Use headphones and microphone for best sound quality. While you can log on using your smartphone, we recommend using a desktop, laptop, or tablet to see slides and meeting tools on a larger screen. Make sure that your screen name includes your first name and last initial, or first name and last name, so that we know who we're talking to during the program. In order to ask questions or make comments throughout the hour, you can just simply unmute your microphone when Kay or Ruth or I ask for questions or comments. It's the easiest way to participate and the one that we encourage. If you feel more comfortable, though, typing into the chat box, I'll periodically check into the chat box and bring those questions into the conversation. A third way to participate is to raise your hand in the participant sidebar, and I'll call on you and ask you to unmute your microphone. Finally, we are recording, so if you prefer not to be recorded, just make sure that your video and audio remain muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments that you have. At this point, I am going to make it so that you can unmute yourself. Again, just leave your microphone off if you're not actively asking a question or making a comment. Before we get started, does anybody have any questions? All right, Kay, what will we be talking about today?
Well, hello and welcome to Slow Art Friday. I'm Kay Dunn, and joining me is Ruth Bryant, and today we'll be your guides as we look closely at three artworks from the Asheville Art Museum's collection. And it's great to see several familiar faces on the screen, and I hope everyone's had a wonderful summer. And summer happens to be the theme of our tour today. In fact, more specifically, how I spent my summer vacation. Now, chances are you've had to write one of these classic back to school themes at some point in your school career, or perhaps you've had to help a child come up with ideas for their summer vacation essay. Well, as they say, a picture paints 1,000 words. So hopefully today our three artworks will give you more than enough material for a good essay. Whether it's a favorite beach vacation, or maybe your first summer job, or maybe just kicking back and looking at the clouds go by. We hope today brings back some fond memories. And the best part is there will be no homework assignment, I promise. So let's get started. Okay, this is our first artwork. Let's take just a moment to carefully look at it silently before we start talking about it. Okay, what's going on in this artwork?
Well, it looks like a beach scene in Texas where they're selling souvenirs. I've never been to Texas, but growing up in New Jersey, we went down the Jersey Shore a lot in the summer, and there were always the ocean, the beach, and always souvenirs being sold. Not necessarily rare scotch, but so, yeah.
Okay, so you're pointing out those sign there in the middle, very central. Texas's largest selection of souvenirs, and so what specifically do you see that makes you say that this is at the beach?
Well, it looks like it's a pier and the sand and looks like water in the background there or under.
Okay,
Here. Yeah.
under there. Okay. All right. And then you mentioned the billboard up above, rare scotch. Okay. All right. What more can we find?
I think the coloring is interesting with the greens and the yellows. They have the J&B Scotch at the top and then the souvenir stand with the lights to the left as you go up the stairs. Just the tones of those greens and orangey yellow.
Okay. How would you describe this palette, or how would anyone describe this color palette that's been selected?
It makes it look like a vintage photograph.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Are they clear colors? Are they very distinct colors, or what would you say?
Well, I see an echo in the yellow and green in the billboard, and then sort of the yellow and green, the sand and the water.
All right. So Megan is pointing out the colors at the top of the billboard are sort of repeated there on the face of the building itself, sort of those pale orange and yellows and greens throughout. Okay. Why do you think the artist chose these colors as opposed to more vivid colors?
I just think the faded out colors make it interesting. I mean, other than the white, which appears to be more stark, even the sky and the shadows and the ocean, assuming it's an ocean, are just kind of all faded. But I think it gives an interesting depiction to it.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Oh, I just see peeling paint on the top, it looks like.
Okay, up there.
So the structure looks old and the photograph looks old.
Okay. All right. So the photograph looks old and maybe a little faded, because that sort of look to it. Maybe a little washed out, perhaps. All right. How would you say the artist conveys, we talked about place. We've got Texas, and it looks like we've identified the place. What about time? When do you think this took place, this point in time? When do you think it was?
It looks to me, it's very nostalgic. It looks to me like 50s and 60s. And I want to say it looks very hot. And I think of a bottle of scotch as nothing that's going to cool me down. So I would have preferred like beer if you have to do liquor. I just believe this is a moment in time in the 50s and 60s.
Okay. All right. You started to talk about the sort of the feeling of it. Let's imagine that you found yourself suddenly inside the scene depicted in this artwork. How would the air around you feel?
Humid.
Maybe like it has around here recently, but worse.
I can't even imagine a breeze, unfortunately. I'd be under it in the shade.
Okay, all right. What would you be wearing? What would you be wearing if you were here?
As little as possible.
I'd be wearing a cover up so I wouldn't get sunburned.
All right. Yeah, I look at this and immediately think of sunburn.
You know, to
Okay.
Sandy's point,
And
she
hot
said
feet.
she said she'd be under it.
Oh,
And
under it,
as soon
yeah.
as she
Yeah.
said that, I
Under
started to notice that I hadn't really noticed before. Usually if it's a beach scene during the summer, you expect to see lots of people around, and I see just this one lady sitting under there. Like you said, Sandy, I guess my eye went to her when you said I'd be sitting under it, but she's it. I guess there might be one person right here and maybe someone inside, but otherwise there's this really interesting lack of people.
I know.
If it's a resort sort of area or you know,
Yeah.
a beach
How
retreat
about-
we're going in the summer.
How about at the bottom of the stairs? Can we zoom in there to the left of the bottom? Do those look like people maybe getting ready to?
I couldn't tell if those were people or cutouts of people of some sort. It's sort of odd.
Maybe just like one person looking out, you know, on sort of whatever's behind the pier here, here. But that's it. I thought like, hey, that was also maybe a cutout, but it's really hard to say.
It is hard to tell. How does the sort of lack of people, when you maybe expect to see people, how does that affect the mood of this artwork?
Well, I just think I saw a skeleton when we were zoomed in. There's a
Really?
raft on the right-hand side. And then does that just me, or is that a skeleton?
Where, Megan?
Yeah.
On the other side of the entrance, there's a raft on the
Oh,
right side.
here.
Is that a
Oh.
Oh, so this is like a lifeboat or something, it looks like, or
Some
something.
sort of raft, it looks like. Yeah.
And then you're talking about this. Good eye,
Yeah.
Megan.
Wow. Yeah, I sort of see a skull too. I hadn't noticed that before or something.
It's kind of eerie. It's almost like the setting of a horror movie or something.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
Halloween with the orange lanterns or something, even though you know it's summertime.
Joanne in the chat says that it looks like it's from the 50s or 60s, and it reminds her of photorealism. She's maybe isn't sure if this is a photograph at all, but maybe an artwork that is made to look like a photograph.
All right. Well, let's talk about that a minute. Okay. So when you first saw this artwork, did you think it was a painting or a photograph? How many people like me thought it was a photograph? Sandy's shaking her head no. All right. All right. Well, what clues, Sandy, help you sort of think through it and decide it was a painting?
Well, I think it was also the shade, and I didn't see, I just didn't see the idea of a photograph. It's too blurry in areas, like just behind the pier. I don't think those should have been so blurry if it were a photograph, because I don't think that they're far away at all from the pier. I just didn't think that the waves were true. And maybe I'm naive. I just looked at it and went, painting.
Okay. Would you feel differently if you found out it was one or the other? Let's say you thought it was a painting and now you realize it's a photograph, or the other way around. you thought it was a photograph, and now you find out it's a painting. How would that change your view of the artwork?
Well, for me, if I knew it were a photograph, it's so washed out to me in parts that would mean something. It would be an old photograph, and I guess it was a time when they were pushing J&B. And I'll tell you the big thing, that would never stand for today. Even I don't think in Atlantic City would they have this trashy advertisement above these souvenirs. That's my gut. This is a long time ago when you were allowed to advertise like crazy and not care about the environment.
Okay, and yeah, so maybe the billboard, the visual pollution, but also maybe, you know, maybe this is a family kind of vacation place, and, you know, is it appropriate to have this ad above the souvenir shop? I guess you could sort of look at it both ways. All right. So anybody else, if you think it's a photograph, if that's been your first impression, and you were to then find out that it's a painting, what goes on in your mind as you make that little shift? Do you value it more as one or the other?
No, it looks like it's a postcard to me.
Mhm.
So it could either be a postcard from a photograph or a painting, but I guess it almost, in a way, I would think it would be more three-dimensional if it were a painting, you know, that maybe the artist could give it more depth. It looks
Okay.
really flat to me.
All right.
I think
Okay.
they're two very different talents. I mean, I admire people who can paint because I can't. I once went to Twist and Paint or whatever that was and tried to paint a chipmunk, but yet photographers to capture certain things, and then in today's day to be able to edit or Photoshop it, that's a different kind of a talent. So I would admire both of them.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a look at the information that we have about this artwork. The next slide. Okay. All right. Well, the title is Straight Shot. It's by Ron Kleeman from 1980. And just a little brief intro about him. He was born in 1937 in Michigan, and he did die in 2014. He became well known as a photorealist artist. So someone had put that in the chat. That's what it reminded them of, photorealism, and that's in fact what this is. And this was produced in the he began his work in that genre in the early 70s. His photorealism is a painting style that emerged in Europe and the US in the late 1960s. It's characterized by its painstaking detail and precision, and typically uses a photograph as a reference. And that's the primary visual reference, and photorealist artists strove to create pictures that looked as close to photographic as possible, often focused on some sort of technical aspect, like how light reflects or glass, something often shiny, although this one, not so much. It's, I think Megan said flat, and I sort of agree with that. Kleeman also painted some shiny things like race cars and fire engines, and he'd do Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade balloons and things like that. A quote of his, he always said he liked shiny objects. So I will have to admit, I really thought this was a photograph because of all the things you said that if you were going to do a painting, it would have more depth to it, I thought. So anyway, interesting. The different impressions you get of this.
The
All
size
right.
is interesting because
Go ahead.
it's larger. I mean, it's not postcard size. It's pretty large.
It is, yes. Yeah. So I don't know, if you saw it in person, you might get a little different perspective of it than seeing it like this. Okay, well, let's move on to I'll turn it over to Ruth for the next artwork.
Thanks, Kay.
All right.
That was interesting. So let's take 10 seconds and quietly look at this picture. Okay, so let's start those VTS questions. What's going on in this artwork?
There's a car parked in front of a Browns and a White Palace Cafe, but I don't know where this is. This doesn't ring any bells to me. I don't know what a Browns is. And obviously a cafe is a cafe. The time and place are kind of only by the car do I think it's old. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that car. What do you see in the car that makes you say that it's old?
Well, the shape, the tail fins, I guess, and the shape of the car. And I think the coloring's interesting, though, that the blue and white in the car takes from the blue behind the Browns on the roofing shingles and the white from the White Palace Cafe. But,
yes.
Yeah.
There's almost, do you feel maybe, what would you call that when they are using the colors in the painting? Does that give you a sense of anything that helps you with the painting? Does it give you, does it make you feel led into it? Or how does the painting feel when they use colors in different spots like that? Anyone?
Is balanced. I see echoes of the red, white, and blue.
Yeah, I was like wondering about that because I noticed that same thing. And there seems like there's, what Laura was saying, that there was a lot of balance in the color choices. How else do you think that the artist provides some visual variety in the scene? Do you have any other senses that you think are engaged by the way he paints?
The three buildings are sort of have distinct architecture. The Browns looks like maybe a furniture store. And it's got a kind of a Tudor, I think, roof style, and the kind of the cursive scroll kind
of the signage.
Of the signage.
Yeah.
And then the cafe is smooth and shiny, almost like maybe marble.
Do you feel, the marble, does that make you, does that lend you into like, when you would touch that, how would that feel if you touched the front of that versus the front of the Browns store?
The marble might be cold and the brick might be hot.
Right. There would be a different to the texture, to the sense of touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else feel that there's any other variety in that engages you?
Joanne in the chat said the different lettering on the signs.
Oh, yeah. And so what type of, when you're looking at that and you see the two different styles of lettering, does that actually promote a feeling of what those establishments might be like, or what they're kind of promoting, why would you choose a different lettering style on a different establishment? Somebody had said something about Brown's being, what was it that you said, that it was like a furniture store?
That's what it looks like to me. I can see a television, and it just looks there, and it just looks like a sofa. Yeah, and then it looks like there's the cafe, and then there's the shoe store, or at least it may be a department store, clothing store, but it says shoe sale.
Oh, yeah.
So,
okay, over there. Yeah, yeah. And you see the 75%. Yeah.
That's a heck of a shoe sale. So it makes me want to go in. 75% off. Heck yeah.
That's pretty nice. Do you think this? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I see under Brown's. I hadn't looked at it closely, but I see pairs of shoes in there. So
I do
that's
too.
interesting you say
dealing
that.
with two shoe stores here.
Yeah, yeah. Does anyone else see that going on in there?
okay.
Would you, can anybody think back to like a time and think of, when you think of Brown's, does that lead you to think that there could be shoes?
Buster Brown's.
Right.
But it looks like they're all white.
I know. I agree with
It's
that.
summer.
Well, yeah, I was wondering about that. I mean, is there a time or place where, because I don't see a lot of people these days wearing white shoes unless they're maybe sneakers, not maybe white heels so much. But does that give us a clue maybe as to the time of year? Is it like Easter time or
Right.
Summertime?
Yeah, and getting back to that time frame when we were talking about, like, that could give you a clue to time and place. Equally, when I think Laurel was saying, she was mentioning about the car, I was like, do we have any men in this group that are like one of those vintage automobile identifiers like my parents used to be?
Come on, Ruth, that doesn't, it doesn't
I
have
know,
to
I
be a
shouldn't do
man.
that, but my mom was like that. I actually sent this, my father's passed, so I sent it to my mom because I can remember driving down the road as a kid and my parents would be like, a car like this would pass and they would be like, oh, it's a 56, or no, it's a 57 because of this shape. And what I remember my parents talking about is how identifiable from year to year cars were, dependent on just very small tweaks in the design characteristics. So I ended up sending this photo, this picture to my brother-in-law, who was born in the 50s and he's a car nut. And he said he dated it as a 55 Oldsmobile, which I thought was interesting. My mother got to the point where she said it's definitely mid 50s, but it's not later 50s because it doesn't have those gigantic wings that they put on the back of the automobiles during that time. So it was one of those things that, like, immediately you see the car, and I think that some people are immediately engaged by the car. But it's interesting that we were talking more about the businesses in the background. So do you think this picture was painted from life?
So there's an interesting conversation going on in the chat. Sandy had sort of posed, how do we know it's a painting? And Joanne said, well, maybe it's another example of photorealism.
What makes you think, what do you see that makes you think of photorealism? As we were talking about it, Kay was mentioning it. Does anybody see anything?
Well, there's reflection. It's shiny.
Very true. Where do you see that?
Off of the car.
Car mostly, yeah. Anybody see any other spots that you can see the?
I was like looking at the windows. It's hard to tell if this is, it kind of looks like, now that I see it better, maybe curtains inside. But you're right, Sandy. You know, one of those hallmarks of photorealism tends to be these like big, beautiful windows with a reflection of something in front of it. And, you know, if you look at this window here, there isn't a whole lot of reflection or anything that really, you know, is sort of a virtuoso capture of whatever's on the other side of it. Again, this reminds me of like a really lonely scene, like the one that we just looked at before. You know, where are the people in this picture?
So that
Where
was
is
one of-
everybody on this summer vacation?
That's a really good question, because it's like, do you think that that's a unique quality of these pictures that we've been looking at? Where are the people in this one? This one's especially, like, as far as I can see, there's no one in the car. So does that give you a feeling to it, to this picture? And what is the feeling that you would pick?
It's almost like a ghost town, like an abandoned place.
Yeah.
There's no people, there's no animals, there's nothing else. I mean, the colors are very balanced. Even again, now looking at the red, because you've got the little red in the back of the car with the little fin taillights there. And then you've got the browns red, and then the red to the very far left. And even that little newspaper box that it looks like newspaper stand thing is red, and you've got a little red in the brick. So the coloring is nice, but there's nobody there.
I think of it as a very hot noontime, and that license plate says Alabama. I think of it as a very small town. It's really
Ooh,
hot.
Good
And
eyes.
everyone is inside where it's air conditioned, and because of the long yellow curb, no one can park there. So, you know, I think that is just specific for that spot. And I don't think there's a lot of people out when it's hot.
So you say that it's a hot day in the summer. Is there anything else in the painting that makes you think that of that in particular?
I'm seeing beams of sunlight shining down to the car.
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
Shining above the bee. And maybe that's just, you know, heat, haze, maybe it's just illuminating dust.
Oh, good thought. Good thought. So she's saying that some of that is like a sunbeam cutting through. And I couldn't tell, because when I first looked at this, I didn't see that. So I'm not sure if could that have been from, I don't know. I didn't see it in the first production that I looked at this particular picture, but I was also kind of leaning toward the shadows of the car, because it looks like there's not much of a shadow in the car, under the car. So I was wondering the same thing, as if it was like a hot noontime summer day, you know, where you're getting almost like the straight sun above you and not much of a shadow below it. Does this scene remind you of any type of like a movie, book, or a magazine?
It reminds me of Grease.
Oh, Grease. And what do you see that makes you say that?
Well, it's the car, and it's the 50s, 60s, and you know, it's just that era in a little town.
So you're seeing the car from a certain era, and you're also seeing like the cafe, and you're saying, you know, it reminds you of Grease. Anybody else have any other ideas of a painting or a book or even a magazine, a movie? Okay. And the other question I had, if you were sitting in that car, what song do you think would be playing on the radio?
Montavani's Summer Place. If I were in it.
Anybody else have a song to go with the car? Anything else you would think of that might be sitting on the front seat of the car?
I see something in the back seat.
Oh, what do you see?
It's just a large, I mean, maybe it's laundry. A large, you know,
What do you?
Almost looks like a burlap sack or something. I mean, it's just
Oh.
stuff filled to the brim across in the back seat.
It seems like there is something back there, and there's something in the left side of the back window that makes you look like though that's not true. Like that's the that might be the mirror. But do you see that thing is that the thing on the right you're talking about?
Yeah, it's
On the
like
right
a
side?
sack of laundry or something.
Okay, so if it was a sack of laundry, does that make you think of anything? Like who would have a sack of laundry in their back of their car?
Well,
Anyone? When do you carry laundry in your car? Is there any specific time frame you're thinking of in a person's life that they carry a lot of laundry in their car? I just think of this because my daughters, they're both off in college right now. So I guess my thought was like college student, maybe.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you were walking past the cafe, what smells do you think would be coming out of that place?
I think of a Chinese cafe, believe it or not, because of the curtains.
Oh, interesting. So what in particular about the curtains?
Well, it just is so clean, and that's what I've seen before. And the plants in the front. I was surprised that they called it a cafe if they're gonna be Chinese, but that's what I thought of.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I agree with that. And because I think a lot of Chinese restaurants have palace in the name. And I just picture walking in and seeing those scrolls. So maybe the cafe sign, to me, that looks like a 40s diner. And maybe it's just been revamped a little bit to be because the bottom windows don't really match the circles on the top.
Oh,
And
yeah.
kind of the kind of black, I don't know, it's a different shape. It seems like it should be a rectangle, but it's this sort of ornate kind of cutout. And then looks like maybe gold leaf kind of just outline painted, and the plants too.
Okay. So you're saying that the way that not just the curtains, but the fact that it's called a palace, and kind of using some of the decor that's inside, like the plants in the window and some of the outlining of the window, give you a feeling that maybe it's not, it may be a certain type of a cafe or reused or repurposed cafe that is moving into, like maybe it was in the 40s and now it's moving into selling Chinese food or something like that. And that's interesting. I was wanting to kind of compare and contrast this particular picture to the last one. And I was thinking about how they differ when you think about the concept of the theme of Slow Art Friday, what I did on my summer vacation. Do you think of this as a destination for a vacation, and why?
This is like a brand new town. It's sparkling. And the other one was so washed out. I think of this as a place where people are living, not where you would go to vacation. And the other one is where you go to vacation. You go to the seashore.
Okay. So you're saying this is more what you're trying to say is this is more like a hometown. Yeah. So this is like when you're talking about what you did on my summer vacation, it would be more like I hung out around town. Right. Does anybody think of anything?
I visited grandma's.
Oh, so you're
town.
Oh, so it's like a visit to somebody else's hometown. Oh, okay. And you think of that because of, you said grandmas. What make you think of grandma?
Well, when you go on a vacation, don't you usually go to grandma's?
Huh?
And you go out to eat. You go out to eat.
Oh, true. True. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about the artist for this. Can we put up the name of this is called White Palace, and the artist's name is John Bader. It was painted in 1980. It is a painting, and definitely from a different time than seems to be suggested by the car. So John Bader was born in Indiana in 1938. He was a photorealist. Bader's work focuses on 20th century roadside Americana, especially documenting and preserving the automobile culture of diners, roadside architecture, and signage. He spent most of his youth in Atlanta, Georgia, where he traveled around on a Schwinn bike, taking photographs of old buildings and cars with a Brownie camera. Bader's inspiration of rural American roadside scenery he attributes to the time he spent traveling Route 29 between Atlanta and Alabama during his art school years at Auburn University. He relocated to New York during the Mad Men era of the 1960s, where he worked as an art director for a prestigious advertising agency. Bader spent his lunch times visiting the Museum of Modern Art near his workplace and was inspired by the photography of the Farm Security Administration, such as Berenice Abbott and Walker Evans. He left advertising to pursue fine art, combining his artistic skills with his love of documentary photography and a vast collection of vintage postcards. Melding his many passions, Bader considers his artistic quest to preserve the landscape and culture of a unique period of time. So I think you guys hit most of the right places. So I'm going to turn this back over to Kay for our last art.
All right. Thanks, Ruth. Okay, let's take, again, just a moment to carefully look at this and before we talk about it. Okay, what's going on in this painting?
I think it's depicting clouds. And it looks like sky and clouds to me, although I can't discern if any of those shapes are supposed to be representative of figures or hot air balloons or something, but clouds in the sky.
All right, so you're seeing the blue background and then things that look like clouds. And you mentioned you're not sure if you see shapes. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Anybody find anything in the painting that might look like a shape?
Well, I'm having a completely different perspective. I loved this when it was in the museum. But looking at it on my screen, I'm seeing an airplane, that kind of rectangle, kind of little shape that's in front of the big cloud.
Is it the one right below the big cloud, sort of to the left?
It's kind of like in the middle, kind of divide. And then it looks. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say that sort of wedge shape.
Yes.
Okay, that one. All right.
Yeah, it looks like bombs dropping.
Wow.
And then the top of the clouds look like flames to me, kind of the orangey brown color. So I don't know what made me think of that.
All right. So go ahead.
Oh, I just agreed with Megan. I thought that the tops of those clouds had a almost like burnt look. For better or worse.
All right, so you're looking at the colors up at the tops of the big cloud and the ones at the top. Some brown colors, not typically what you might expect in clouds. Okay. What else? What more can we find here?
It looks kind of abstract. It doesn't look real to me. And, you know, just doing interpretation, it's funny because we recently got mushrooms from the farmer's market, different kinds, and we got lion's mane mushroom and chestnut mushrooms, and those look like mushrooms to me.
Huh. Okay, so what about these? Describe the mushrooms that you're talking about. How do they sort of look like these figures?
Well, the shapes and the colors, especially the two at the top with the burnt on the edges, and those just look like mushrooms.
Okay, sort of with the smooth white underneath, and then the edges sort of curled up with the brown showing underneath. Okay, interesting. All right. Anybody else find anything here?
Well, I see a goose and a camel and a
Wow.
duck.
Okay, help us out here. Where do you see these things?
Okay, the goose is the second cloud on the right border at the top. You see its yellow bill,
Oh gosh, I'm having trouble.
orange bill.
I see
No, on
it
the
is
right.
flying.
No, that's the camel.
Oh, that's
Okay. So where am I pointing, Sandy?
So on the right side of the painting, there, that's the goose. And below it, right below it, you'll see a duck flying. And then to the right of the goose is an interesting camel that doesn't have the exact right head, but that's what I got.
camel. All right. Okay.
So
All
I'm
right.
wondering how often, Sandy, you go out and sit outside and stare at the clouds and find things in them.
With your mushrooms, maybe.
I see them everywhere.
Oh. All right. Well, we're getting some interesting observations here. Okay. Anybody else see some things they want to point out?
So Joanne has a comment in the chat that I'll share with everyone. She said, "It looks dreamy to me, and it was painted either from a high elevation as it looks close up and there's no horizon line, or looking out of an airplane window, because I like looking a lot out of plane windows. And I like to
Okay.
make associations with the shapes of clouds like animals and faces." So you and Joanne have a lot in common, Sandy.
Yes. Okay, so that's an interesting observation. There is no horizon in this painting. We don't see a line going across, so that may indicate that it was viewed, or the artist's perspective was from up high, maybe a building or an airplane.
That just made me think. I've been reading Joni Mitchell's biography, Reckless Daughter, and they talk about her writing the song Clouds, and from Both Sides Now. And she was actually in an airplane, like flying above the clouds, looking down, and it was her first flight. So she was looking down at clouds and thought how interesting it is that we can look at clouds from both sides, from the bottom up or from the top down. So
very interesting. Yeah, and that's sort of what this is. It's making us think about clouds differently, I think, from different viewpoints. And what is a cloud really when you look at it?
So to kind of follow up on what Joanne and Sandy have said about this sort of airplane view, and there's no horizon line, there's nothing that grounds you, literally, in this image. I've always thought that the clouds in this painting looked really weird. They look a little electrified, or the lines just are maybe flatter than they need to be, or there's some sort of distortion. It's always sort of bothered me a little bit. And when Joanne said it reminded her of being in an airplane, I started to think of the glass in airplane windows and how there's multiple layers with air in between, and then it's really thick and it's often scratched, and maybe that's a reason why the clouds look a little distorted. If you're seeing the clouds sort of through some sort of material.
Okay. All right. You mentioned that they look distorted, a little not real, maybe. What elements can you point to, or anybody point to elements
Sure.
here that look real, like you'd say, oh, that's a real cloud, and which ones make it look a little unreal?
So I think, just the gradation of the color of the sky feels right to me. This sort of fluffiness and maybe the center. I don't know what's going on with my thing here. Okay. The fluffiness in the center looks very nice. But if you sort of look at the edges of some of these, like especially here, it just looks bizarre. The darker spots here look like they're sort of bent, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Fragmented.
Distorted a little
Fragmented.
bit. And here too, it looks like they're fuzzier here than maybe some of the others. So
Mhm.
it's like something that's curved that you're looking through,
Mhm. Mhm.
Does anybody think of, like, there's something about this that makes me think of like when you, as a kid, you took a picture of a cloud and cut it out and like decoupage something or did something like that. And there's something about some of these clouds that look like they're pasted on from another image, I guess.
That's interesting. That it has sort of a 3D quality to it. With that, I don't think it has any depth to it. I'm trying to recall, but I think it's just a flat painting. How has the artist achieved that sort of look where you feel like there is depth and some things are closer to you than others?
Yeah, when I sit back, I see the depth, and it's mainly that wedge at 9 o'clock that gives me that depth. It's just floating in on a different plane.
Is it the contrast? Like one is sharp, one has sharp edges, and then in the back, as Christy was saying, you've got the fluffiness.
Well, it has dark edges. It's well defined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you with the edging on that, the purple on the bottom.
Yeah. Is everything in focus? I guess I'm going back, Megan, to your first comment about a different view of this and what it might be. And as I looked at it, I'm seeing little pieces that they don't look cloud-like anymore. The more I look at them, they look like they're sort of flying out there.
It's fragmented, I think.
Yeah.
Almost like you had a piñata and broke it and all these things fell out of it. I mean, it's interesting, the colors, because the lighting on the two clouds up at the top near the big giant fluffy one with where it's burnt, and then the piece that sticks out of the other one, where down below you've got other faded pastel colors with the yellows and blues and pinks. And again, it's very abstract, open to interpretation. You really can't tell what these things are. Are they birds? Are they people? You don't know.
One of them actually kind of looks like the one in the center, almost the center, toward that one that's almost all purple. Reminds me of those candies that are like filled with licorice, the pink and black, and I don't remember what they're called, but they had like white and pink, and they had licorice in the center. You'd get them at the movie theater, but they almost it almost looks like a pill.
Good and plenty.
Good and plenty.
Good and plenty.
Yeah, good and plenty. Thank you. Thank you, Joanne.
Well, you're making you think of puzzle pieces like a jigsaw puzzle now. And they're scattered.
Yeah. All right, well, I tell you what, let's take a look at the information that we have on this painting. All right, this is called Cloud Painting, number 94, Jacqueline Herman Gurevich, around 1980. Well, here's an interesting thought. This was called coincidence, but all three of the paintings that we've looked at today were created in 1980. Does that surprise anybody, or what do you think about that?
That is surprising. but I guess it shouldn't be, because an artist can create whatever they want to create. But you know, they have felt very different in time.
Uh-huh. Was there anything about this period in time you think that would have lent itself to different divergent styles and ways of presenting reality, I guess?
Well, how about someone on drugs
Yeah.
having a surrealistic dream?
Mm-hmm.
We've had the nuclear war, and now we're going to have happiness because it's still blue, and that's over with, and we're going to live happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, when I think of the 80s, I think of sort of global crises. I think of rise in violent crime and rise in, as you said, Sandy, drug usage, but I think of it in a negative sense rather than a positive sense. And, you know, that having this sense of nostalgia for, you know, rightly or wrongly, for times gone by, for simpler time, is always a coping mechanism for people who are dealing with things that they don't know how to deal with. And in the 80s is when I think about this, like, you know, on the oldies stations, it was the 90s, 1950s and 1960s music. And does that mean on the oldie stations now it would be music from like 2000, 1990? It just seems so strange to me. But you know, we always as
According to
human
my daughters.
beings, you know, try and find like a time when it's something to escape to, when we don't know how to handle sort of everything that's going terribly in the world.
Interesting. Well, I'll tell you a little about this artist. She was actually born in Paris in 1933, but moved to New York as a young child. And while she was attending high school in New York, she heard about Black Mountain College. And she knew she wanted to be an artist, but she didn't think conventional college was going to work for her. So she applied and was accepted at Black Mountain College for the summer of 1950. And then she went on to study at the University of Chicago. She's known for her paintings of the sky and clouds, also does urban backgrounds as well, and utilizes both abstraction and realism as a tool to capture them. This particular work is from an ongoing series of clouds that she painted from high floors on a skyscraper. In skyscraper, so we're right on her perspective there. She says, the sky has always been central to my painting. It's inexhaustible. It is always there. Observing the sky inevitably leads to reflection about the fugitive, the recurring, the abiding. Well, I think the more I've looked at this with you guys, it's really appreciated a lot more too. It's a beautiful painting, I think. Well, that really concludes our tour today, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. I do have one last question. It's not a homework assignment, but if you were to paint a picture of your favorite summer memory, what would it include?
Swimming with my children in the lake.
All right.
Gosh, when I think of summer is not my favorite season. I burn. I don't like, you know, my skin burns. I don't like to feel hot. So whenever I think of summer, it's not ever really a happy association.
Oh,
Sunburn.
That's not good. Yeah.
I am a shoulder season person, and I'm so grateful to live in this place where we have really great 4 seasons.
Perfect for Asheville, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, mine is all about food in the summer. I don't know why, but mine would be full of burgers, hamburgers, watermelon, peach
Okay,
ice
that
cream.
is, you're
Love
absolutely right.
watermelon.
That's the best part. If we have to have summer, at
That's
least
the-
we have beautiful, tasty tomatoes and corn.
Yeah,
Peaches.
It would be
Peaches,
bursting with food. That would be
Fair,
my
that's
food.
fair. Okay, I think we need to have lunch one day. I'm learning more about you.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. It's I've certainly learned a lot more about these artworks and hearing your comments. So thanks a lot.
Thank you to
Thank
Kay.
you.
Thank you to Ruth. It's been great having you on today and seeing all
Thanks.
of you. Next Friday, August 20th, our theme is the element of line. And our docent, Hank Bovee, has chosen, actually, now that I look at it, he's got 3 photographs, but they're all wildly different from one another. And all incorporate line in an interesting way. So if you'd like to get registered for that, head over to our website, ashevilleart.org, and click into the element of line and sign up. We look forward to seeing you again sometime soon, and everyone have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks.